Welcome to the Content Amplified podcast, brought to you by Masset. Our goal is to help you get more from your marketing content. Each episode is a 10 to 15 minute interview with industry experts that share amazing insights to help you squeeze as much juice from your content as you possibly can. Here's today's interview.
Welcome back to another episode of Content Amplified. Today I'm joined by Megan. Megan, welcome to the show.
Hi, thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, happy to have you here. Well, Megan, before we dive into the subject today, love to get to know you a little bit. And then also 2 questions we always ask. What do you love about content and what do you love about marketing?
Those are great questions. Well, just a real quick high level on me. I am a business transformation executive. I've got experience really starting out leading sales and marketing, but I've done everything from running HR, technology teams, and risk management teams, and owning my own agency. So I've kind of got a good big picture view of everything. And I like to bring that back in terms of sales and marketing and what we're trying to do for the business. As far as what I love about content and what I love about marketing, I think content is such a great tool to connect with audiences, whether it's business audiences or your own personal audience, to really create meaning and value. And I think marketing is really the way then that you find those audiences, if you don't already have them, to make that connection. And really in today's world, where we live, I think connection is something that a lot of us are missing. So if you do it right, you can really change people's worlds.
I love it. That's cool. Well, today we're going to talk about content strategy, which I think is a really fascinating subject. Megan, you're really qualified. You teach this concept at a university. You've had such a long and really productive career, so I'm excited about it. We're going to start out talking about content strategy, and then depending on where the conversation goes, we might see how AI plays a role into the whole sphere of everything. But just to kick it off, Megan, what is content strategy? What does that actually mean? How is that different from content tactics? What does an actual content strategy look like, and what should that be?
When I think about strategy, I really like to make it simple for people to understand. And so to me, strategy is really, what are you trying to accomplish and how are you going to accomplish it? So often I think people just kind of jump into doing because we live in this world where people expect, results. They ask for something and they get it. And strategy, I think, is really where you have to take that pause and say, okay, what is it that we're trying to do? Is that really what we're trying to do? And make sure that you're really clear on that. And then figuring out, okay, so what tools do I have available to actually do the thing that I'm trying to do, and then back into your strategy from that way. So when I say tools, I mean, how much time do you have? What people do you have to do it? Are there actual physical or electronic tools that you have to use it to create that strategy and execute it? And how much money do you have, right? Because that's a big factor. So it's easy to create a strategy, but if you don't think about all those components, you might create a strategy that's not going to be able to be executed, or the tactics, as you say.
Love it. So let's say I'm in business and I'm on the marketing team and I really need to develop a content strategy. Where do I start? Or let's say maybe I have one, but maybe it needs to be reanalyzed and really looking at a little bit deeper. How do I go about assessing and building and creating a really productive strategy instead of just, we need content because it's thought leadership and we need to do this or that? But what are your thoughts on that?
Okay, I love that question, first of all. I think the biggest thing that I have seen, especially as, when I owned an agency, we worked with a lot of businesses and we'd get calls saying, hey, we need this email campaign, right? And it's like, okay, what are you trying to accomplish? And they're like, oh, we just want more sales. Okay, well, how do you know email is actually what you want? Well, because that's, we'll just generate sales quickly if we reach out to our audience. And so what I've often done with marketing leaders or small business owners is really kind of dial them back and say, okay, what is your business strategy? So I think if you want to do a really good content strategy, you have to understand at a high level, what is the business strategy? So when I say that, it's, most people's business strategy is going to have some sort of growth component to it, but growth where? Like, what products or services are you actually trying to sell or promote? Are you trying to get new business? Are you trying to maintain your current business? Are you trying to do more of brand reinforcement versus a sales? Are you trying to break into a new market? So like really understanding like what that big business strategy is to then kind of bring it down to, okay, what's your overall marketing strategy? So what are all the different avenues that you might be doing for marketing? Is it a blog? Is it a podcast? Is it, video out on YouTube? Is it a roadshow that you're doing and going around to different events? So really understanding all those different pieces. And then you start to bring it back to your content strategy to bring it all together to say, great. So for this content strategy, we need to do X, Y, Z that helps support the business strategy so that you can really articulate that. Because I think that especially when you go into the review process with people, if you've got that to back it up, it's harder for people to have an opinion about your content strategy because everybody has an opinion, but it doesn't necessarily mean that their opinion is valid. But if you're basing it off of a business strategy, then you can say, no, but this is why we're doing it this way. So being able to do that. And then I think the other big piece of it is not just having the content strategy, but saying, how can we kind of do more with less? So that might be, if you are making a series of videos, can you turn that into snippets for a blog? Can you turn that into social media posts? If you've got an expert that you're interviewing on video, you might be having them tell a story, but do you know that you've got a bunch of other pieces that you're going to need? So let's also record this segment, because you already have their time and intention, and it's a lot easier to do it all at once. So really looking then across your entire content strategy to say what all the pieces that you're going to need, what are all the different things that you're going to do, and then start to kind of flush that out and then figure out how much money do you have and how much time do you have to actually do this. I know with my teams, I've actually had them record things that we might not use for a year, but in that year, when we finally are getting to that project that we're trying to do, we're like, oh, isn't this great that our old selves did all of this for us and now we can pull it.
I think that's really powerful. I like how you talked about aligning to the business strategy, where it sounds like you have to have such a clear understanding of what the business is trying to accomplish. Like you mentioned, they're going into a new industry or they're trying to disrupt with some new technology, things like that. And I love how you're thinking about it, saying, okay, cool. How are we trying to position ourselves in that space? What is the content actually going to do for us to accomplish the business strategy? So I think it's a really good call to action for anyone that's on a marketing team or a content team. It sounds like you almost have to demand the business to have a really sound business direction and strategy, and that the marketing team really needs to understand it, or else your content strategy is never going to accomplish what you need. And then I love how you talked about just so quickly, here are all the different things that come out of a strategy once you have the right strategy. I think that's like bearing the fruit of having a solid strategy. If you understand exactly what you're trying to accomplish, it's pretty straightforward to say, well, we want to position ourselves in this specific industry. Great. That means this industry is on these channels. So we need to do this, this, and this. And that's how we're going to position ourselves. Great. Let's go have at it. So I love that. How do marketing teams kind of push and put that upward pressure on management to make sure that there's a really solid business strategy so that the content and marketing strategy are aligned and actually accomplishing those things? Do you have any thoughts on that?
I do. And I think there's a couple of different ways, and it's going to depend, of course, on what type of company you are. But I think, going out, reading your annual report, if you happen to be a public company, listening to the analyst calls and seeing what analysts are asking about and how the executives are responding. So really doing your due diligence on that before you go up to upper management to say, so what's your strategy, right? Like go do some research on your own and figure that out. I'm a big believer in sales and marketing being aligned. And so, the people who tend to really understand what the business strategy is the sales team, because they're probably compensated on doing whatever that business strategy is. And they're kind of at the forefront of the business. So go sit with them and understand, like, what are they doing? What are the challenges they're having? What are the obstacles that they're trying to overcome? What's on their magic wish list if they could have anything? Now, I also know sales will ask for the world and not necessarily use everything. So that's where it's really key to develop good, solid relationships with the salespeople to say, how would you use that? And are you using that today? And what do you think your customer would actually do with that, or your prospect, so that you start to understand how that works. If you ever have the opportunity to actually sit in a sales meeting with a customer or a prospect, I think that's really good, because you can kind of watch and observe how they use the different messaging that marketing might put together, how they're using the different tools. That I think would be really, really, really helpful for a good marketer to understand, and then kind of make some assumptions, summarize it, and then go back to either your marketing leader, your sales leader, or upper management and say, hey, before we build this out, I just want to validate that this is what our business strategy is. Could you help me if I'm missing anything critical, right? So don't make upper management do the work. Come to them and say, hey, can you just make sure that this is right? Because I'm going to go do a lot of work off of this. And they're more likely going to respond to that and say, yep, this is good. Oh, no, if you missed this. And it's also going to make you look really smart too.
I love this advice. It's the same advice of come with solutions instead of problems. And I think it's such a smart tactic and strategy to say, do your homework, sound educated, and they'll correct you if you're wrong. But to just show up into a meeting and say, okay, tell me the strategy, tell me what you want. It's a very different appearance. So I think that's an absolute golden technique to make sure that you're doing great things. So Megan, transitioning a little bit, when you're figuring out the strategy, how does AI play a role? Everyone's wondering about AI. Everyone's looking into it. What are your thoughts in general on how AI is playing a role in content strategy?
Yeah, so I'm just going to start by saying that I am not an AI expert, but I am kind of dabbling with it and looking at it. And I think that there's actually a number of different ways that AI could help. So, we just talked about go do your homework. Well, have AI go do your homework, right? Like AI can read an annual report. AI can listen to all these calls. AI can summarize it and make some assumptions for you. You can look at it. You can read it quickly. It can bullet point the stuff out. It can build you a presentation, right? And so I would say, first of all, have them do your homework, and then have AI go analyze your competition. So literally do that same exercise with the competition so that you can see, how do you compare to the competition? How are you different? And then you could even go ahead and ask, like, where is your opportunity in there? Now, I want you to still think about what it says and not just take that verbatim, but it will help you start to see some gaps. And you can do that so quickly now, where, in days past, you'd have to spend all your time out there. Maybe you hire an intern to go do some research for you. Maybe you have a whole marketing research department that's doing this. You can get to that answer a lot faster now. I think in terms of kind of creating your content strategy and executing it, is because this world moves quickly, people expect things a lot faster. If you really embrace AI and understand that it can crank out a lot of the work for you on the back end, you can actually spend more time thinking. And I think as marketers, as creators, as designers, that's the thing that I hear over and over and over when I run teams is, what do you need more of? And people are always like, I just need more time to think. Well, guess what? If you embrace AI correctly, if you figure out how to use the tool to your advantage, it will give you that time that you need to think so that you can think about those things. And then you can ask AI to go do those things for you and spend your time doing, 80% of the thinking up front, have AI go execute that stuff. And then spend the other 20% of your time looking at the results that AI brings back to you to validate, to make sure it got the right intent. Maybe you modify some of your prompts so you're asking better questions. Maybe it triggers something where you're like, oh, I didn't even think about that. Like, let's dig a little bit deeper on that. So I think the biggest thing AI does is actually gives you time to do the part that is actually the more fun part of the job, if I'm being honest.
I love it. And we just talked so much about strategy. AI is, in my opinion at least, never going to take away strategy from people. It's never going to come up with its own prompt and then execute and then deliver material all on its own. It's got to start from someone who has the time, thoughtfully think through the strategy, and then say, great, now I don't have to type every word. Now I don't have to push on the click of my mouse every time in Photoshop. Now I can have AI execute at a very fast pace, and I can spend more time strategically thinking about these ideas and objectives. And I love how you talk about how to embrace it. So many people are afraid of AI. How do they embrace it? What does that transition look like for people afraid to embrace it? I love your methodology and thinking about how it gives you time, but how else should people really embrace AI and how does that work?
Yeah. I mean, I think change is hard for people, right? Like even when I'm going to date myself here, but when we were going from encyclopedias to, Wikipedia to Google to all this stuff, right? Like you have to learn how to use the tool for whatever you need it for. So I think AI can actually make all of us smarter and more talented, but you have to be really true and honest with yourself to understand, like, where's your weakness? And then let's use AI to fill in your weakness instead of being afraid of it, right? Like it can help enhance you versus overtake you. So you have to really start to just play around with it if you haven't. Play around with some of the GPTs that are already set up there. Like I had a fun one that I just did the other day. Don't laugh at this, but it was like, get your astrology chart. And I was like, okay. So I literally hit it. I had to put a couple of inputs in, when was I born, what time, and where in the world was I born? And it spit out all this fascinating information about yourself, right? And that was a good reflection period where I could be like, oh, this really is me. Like, what do I do with that? My astrology chart says I'm good at. And it starts to help you do some self-reflection, right? So you could do that with AI too, to help you figure it out. But I'll give you a great example. I've got a brother who started on the graphic design side. I grew up on the writing side, right? I have zero graphic design skill. He was an okay writer. Well, he now has so embraced AI so much. He's actually a better writer than I am. When I see the stuff he's outputting, I'm like, wow. And that was something that, he thought he was not as good at, but he then embraced AI to kind of fill that gap. Now, I suck at graphic design. I can come up with all these ideas in my head, but I just don't have the talent to do it. But now, you've got Canva that's got AI enhancements to it. I can go out there and start to do all the stuff that I couldn't do. So it can also make your skills more broad. It can enhance areas where you're weak. It can give you that time to be more strategic and allow people to see you showing up more strategic because you're not so busy just executing on these things. It can allow you to do just a lot more work in a shorter period of time. So maybe you still do really love writing, but you need to get that outline cranked out first and you don't have time to write all the articles. Well, you can teach AI to do what's already in your head. And you can do those outlines and then say, okay, now write me articles on this. I think where people are maybe missing or kind of rejecting AI is when they're like, oh, it sounds like a computer, or, it's this, or, I just use it to write an article. It's taking that moment to pause, just like we talked about before you do your content strategy and say, okay, but what is it that I really want AI to do for me? And now let me think about how to specifically ask AI to do that, right? It's not, hey, write me an article. It's, hey, write me an article on AI for this audience. I want it to be this many words. Here's a couple key concepts that I want to have in it. And by the way, I want the language to be really simple and easy to read, right? Or I want it to be really technical, right? So it's taking that time to really think about what is it that you want AI to do? And let's embrace it and use it to our advantage versus being afraid of it. And AI is just on your computer, right? So play around with it and get to know it. One of the first things I did when AI came out was I just had a conversation with it, right? Where it was I just kept asking it questions and what else can you do? And tell me about this. And I like to think of AI now as just my really smart friend that's always there for me when I need them.
I love that. That's amazing. Well, Megan, these episodes are short and we have learned so much in today's episode. If anyone wants to continue the conversation and connect with you online, where and how can they find you?
Sure. So I'm on LinkedIn under Megan Efforts. I'm pretty good about responding to my messages. I do respond to all of them. It might take me a little bit of time, but I do respond. So I welcome people reaching out and connecting with me there. And, if you are looking for another company too that might help you kind of figure out how to embrace AI more. I mentioned my brother, he has started a company called CST Design that really will help you figure out how to do those engineering prompts if you're looking for additional tools.
I love it. And we'll link to Megan's profile in the show notes so you can find her nice and easy. Megan, again, thank you for the time today. Have a wonderful day.
All right, thank you.
Thank you for listening to the Content Amplified podcast. Please subscribe and leave us a review. And for additional ways to get more out of your content, visit our website at getmasset.com. That's getmasset.com. And tune in next time to the Content Amplified podcast.